Hello, today my video is going to be about the classical Latin alphabet, and this is a remake of an older video that I did, so I'll be linking that in the description. Now, what do I mean by classical Latin? Classical Latin is Latin spoken, or rather was the Latin spoken, during the late Republic and the early Empire, so around the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD, around that period, so around the time of Cicero, Caesar and Augustus, also known as Cicero, Caesar and Augustus, that sort of period. Now, since this script is 2,000 years old, you'll expect some differences from the modern alphabet, and I'll be getting to those throughout the video. The first thing you'll be noticing is that there aren't any lowercase letters, and the first letter here is A, or the A, and it's the same as our modern A. Next letter is B, looks like a B. This is going to be the case, all these letters look like our modern uppercase letters. The next letter is G. What you'll notice here is that G is pronounced with a hard C, not a soft C, because that is a change that happened after Latin turned into the Romance languages, such as Spanish, Italian and French. So G. The next letter is D, which looks like that. Then you have E, which looks like that. And then you have F, which looks like that. Then you also have G here. The letter G, or G, is very interesting. It originally was a variant of the letter C that was created, as the stories say, by a schoolmaster called Roga, and he tacked on an extra line to the letter C to make the letter G to distinguish his name and to make it not pronounced as Roca. So there's an interesting fun story for you. The next letter is here Ha, and unlike in pretty much every Romance language stemmed from it, this was actually pronounced in Latin. The next letter is E here, so a long I sound. It's not I, it's E. So a flat vowel sound, it's a monophthong. The vowel sound doesn't change in the mouth. The next letter is Ka. Now, what you'll notice here is that there isn't a letter J. Now, the letter J, or Yod, if you know Germanic names, it didn't exist in the classical Latin period. It was basically an innovation during the medieval era and possibly the Dark Ages, probably the medieval era, where the letter, the letter I stood for both the sound E and Ya, because they're pronounced basically in the same part of the mouth, and so you'd have a word like this. So, you venis, where we'll get onto these letters here in a bit, but this would be pronounced like a y, as in yes or yellow, and this would be pronounced like the vowel is. So you venis, and this served both purposes, but as it became more and more important to distinguish the two in the Romance languages later, because they gathered different pronunciations. Think French, we have E and je, or je, je, very different sounds. Like the word gilet, which means jacket, very, very different sounds. So it's important to make the distinction there between the very drastically different sounds. Like even in Spanish, you have h, and then you have e, right? So what they did is they gave it an extra long descender there, and to make it different from the e. And so that's how the letter J was born, but it didn't exist at this period. It was just E and then Ka. Then Ka existed, and it was used for mainly Greek loanwords. It was rarely used in Latin words. The only word that is very common is calendaris, which means calendar. The next letter is L, which is just an L. Then there was M, just like there. Then N, and then there was O. Now it's pronounced with a long O, not O, it's O. And then you have B. Then you have the letter Q, which looks like this. Sorry, I'm losing grip on the paper. Then a line through there. Q. and then you have R. I can't run miles at the front, sorry. R, which looks like that. And then you have, which was very similar to this symbol, which ended up being the P, but in lots of other scripts, such as Greek scripts, such as Cyrillic, the thing that looks like a P became an R. This was a variant which has an extra leg in its italic alphabet, and that became our modern letter R. The next letter is S, which looks like that, and is related to the Greek letter sigma, but only the final form, where it looks like a C with an extra leg at the bottom. Then you have D. D looks like that, capital T. Then you have U. Here's another example of where there was a letter that did double job. Think back here to this word, Juvenis. This letter here was an U, and then this was a W, as in Venis. Not Venice, Venis. The V pronunciation only came later in Latin dialects and languages later, where it became a V and then a V. So that was an innovation later, and the what ended up being the case was that the original idea was to have a smoothed out version of the letter V. Instead of this, you'd have this for the sound U, and this would be W or V. What ended up happening is that this was used at the beginning of words, this was used in the middle of words, so you'd have some English texts, like in Shakespeare sometimes, where love was spelt like that, even though that's a V sound. And then, so it was quite confusing. And then convention afterwards was everywhere where there is a V sound, like there, you use a V, but you use a U sound where there's a U, like in use. English has weird pronunciation, so that doesn't really count. But then there's also the problem, where does the W sound go, right? Because you have a V, you have an U, but you don't have a W anymore. So what lots of Germanic scribes in English, in England as well, they had this letter, which was Win, which was based off of a rune, but it lost favourability over this other variant, which was either two V's next to each other or two U's next to each other, which was pronounced as a word. So a double V or a double U. You recognise this from French, where it's W, which literally is double V, and then you have English, W. And so this eventually merged into, this kind of shape, and then you have a W, right? This didn't exist in this. This was purely this was a medieval innovation, and before that as well. And so in the classical period, they only needed one letter, which was V. Or U, sorry, not V, U. This is the letter U. Then you have X, and then you have Y, which is written like this. It's very similar to this letter. That's because they're actually related. This was a precursor to this, but when the Roman or Latin scribes adopted it, they removed the stem and then extended the V shape down to the bottom, so that's why it looks like that. And the Greek sound, U, shifted to U, which is a very different sound. So you have a word like this. Let me just quickly write it down. Systema, which is not sustema, it's sustema. It's a very different sound. And so when the Roman scribes were borrowing Greek words, they thought, we probably need a separate letter for that because it's such a strange sound. And so what they did is they basically took the Greek letter, which at the time looked like this, and then basically turned it into this, the more angular form that we are familiar with. And so that's where we get the letter Y, which literally means Greek E. And because it's called E, because it's very similarly related to the sound E, it's just like the sound E, but it's pronounced with the lips rounded, so U. I, U, very similar. So, Y. The next letter, which is the final letter in the classical letter alphabet, is Zeta, which is pronounced as Z or Z. It depends on the word. It's a bit confusing because at this time, the Greek letter was sometimes earlier was pronounced as a Z, which is contrary to popular thoughts, perhaps, and then it was later pronounced as a Z or a D. And so this is a strange pronunciation for the letter Zeta, which was only adopted by the Romans. So the letters in order, we have A, B, K, D, E, F, G, H, I, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, X, Y, and Z. And that is the classical Latin alphabet. I hope you've enjoyed. Please subscribe for more.